Welcome everyone to this amazing webinar where AppFollow helps you shift and KantanAI. I'm going to talk about how to create an exceptional global user experience. And obviously, I bet all of you guys know what we are delivering and the products that we have that can help you do these different things. But what we're going to speak about today is obviously how you can do it, but also more about how we have seen the different angles and different possibilities that you have, how that can actually help you do this. But first, let's introduce who's participating today, and that is you, Dominic. If you would, can you introduce yourself?
So I'm Dominic Kelly. I'm the Technology Sales Director at KantanAI, and we provide neural machine translation technology to help improve customer experience. That's where we are. I've got about 22, 23 years in language technology. So I've been around the block and been hardened by experience, shall we say. And that's really my background. But I'm as a person, I've got a few kids, so I'm a dad. So I have also experience of managing chaos. So that's a good thing to have in life too.
I love that introduction. And that's all about creating a very nice experience. We have to help our kids go into the world as great humans. And next up is you, Tim.
Yeah, thanks. Hey, everybody. Tim Dean, Director of Success here at HelpShift. I've been with the company for about 4 years now, working with my, strategic enterprise brands, ensuring that, we help them achieve their support goals, taking what we've, learned from them and then applying it to how to roll out a support operation that's the most efficient and productive. I've been in success for just over 10 years, leading teams of CSMs or the equivalent for other SaaS companies, like an automated marketing company, an e-commerce platform where I learned a lot about, customer acquisition and experience there from a brand perspective and how that can tailor into support as well. And I'll touch on that a little bit later. And prior to that, I was in finance. I survived, the dot-com bust and the 2008 recession, tracking institutional capital for the C-suite. So excited to be with all of you today. And, we'll learn a bit more about an exceptional global user experience.
Nice. Awesome. And I am Louise, and I'm the product marketing manager at AppFollow. I've only been with the company for almost 1 year, but have SaaS experience, and I've been working in almost any vertical that you can ever find on Earth. So I have a lot of experience pulling in and being very customer centric, and that's why also this topic of creating user experiences, listening to what your customers are saying and trying to unlock it is it lies very close to my heart. At AppFollow, we have an amazing platform that allows app development companies, like a ton of all the ones that that almost have an app, unlock user insights and figure out how they can leverage those to build a better app experience, both from the perspective of figuring out where things are good, bad, where your app is performing maybe not as you expected it to, and also how you can engage with your customers and thereby learn more about them and create an even better experience. And last but not least, accelerate the growth of your app. And today I'm very happy to have you guys on the team to chat with you about how we can do this, how it's even possible to create a user experience on a global scale. What we will today talk about is, and what we'll dive into is then how to create this exceptional user experience worldwide. Because as all of you guys know, it's not just like your area, your market that is, when you launch a product, when you launch an app that is relevant to understand and also support from a user perspective or customer experience perspective. So we'll dive into that, and then we'll dive more into how you can use it and increase your user satisfaction and also retention, because as all of us know it's easier to grow your existing accounts or your existing user base than acquiring new ones. And therefore, I would claim that it's very important that you focus on how you do it. And then last but not least, how you can make the most of user feedback to actually build better app or product experiences. So that's it for today. If you have any questions, then feel free to put them into the chat. No, not in the Q&A section. And then we have an awesome team sitting behind the scene answering them, or we'll make sure that that either Dominic, Tim, or I answer your questions. So starting with a bit of stats and like looking at how things have evolved over the last couple of years and decades even, then we obviously see that customer expectations have evolved. We have, as part of the pandemic, seen an incredible increase in what's been interesting and not. Like, for example, the travel industry not had it's so much fun, but now they're on the rise again. But more importantly, what is very interesting is that when you look at the world population, then 94% of them does not speak English as their first language. As an example, that's my native language is Danish, so obviously I have it as a second language, and I thereby jump into the second portion, which is 75% that speaks English as a second language. And that's very interesting, especially for you, Dominic, from Kantan, which are supporting users across the world with AI, especially. So is that anything that you would maybe comment on, or you have any thoughts around?
Yeah, it's interesting when you design or create an app. The focus is always on development usually, and not necessarily always on user experience in the beginning. Functionality, and often developers and creators of technology are creating things in their mother language, in English, or and don't really see the effects of what the translated application or the user experience might be in other languages, which is it's an interesting thing, right? So this is why when you're looking at the overall experience, you really should consider, not that the app is going to be solely focused on a particular market, but it's going to grow. So plan early is one thing I always say to people.
That's a good tip. And that again also taps into like planning early is also about understanding what is it that your users expect. And what we have seen, what we see based on the stats, is that users actually expect a 24/7 support. And it's in their own time zone, and it should be quickly and efficiently. And especially there, you, Tim, from HelpShift, and with also your profession within customer success and customer experience, know a lot about that. And I know you have a lot of great thoughts around it.
I do. Thanks, Emma. Yeah, support is an extension of a brand. So that experience is really important. We have tools within HelpShift that can help brands speak to their customers, whether it's the type of channel that you want to work in. We have what we call asynchronous messaging. It's kind of like SMS or text messaging. It's not session based. Customers can interact with support, kind of put their phone away or their device away, go about their business. And then when they get a response back, they get notified, then go back into their device or the app itself and pick up that conversation. So you're not really tied, to a phone call. You're not tied to a session-based chat on, let's say, your laptop or your phone. And it's like, hey, I need to go do something else and come back. And when you do, it's gone. So that can be a really frustrating experience. And so with a asynchronous messaging experience, we feel like, number one, that just gives the right type of channel for customers to interact or brands to interact with their customers. But then when you think about it from support, right, and 24/7 in their own language, personalization, a lot of that comes with what you probably already would know as an org about your customer base, right? Whether it's the common issues that they would write in about, and then taking that and maybe not asking, hey, how can I help you? If you figure out that, if it's like an order info for an e-commerce brand or a purchase info if you're a gaming app, it's maybe it's not, when was your last purchase? Maybe it's, oh, I see you made these last 5 transactions. Maybe it's one of these, right? So again, it's sometimes the customer doesn't have all that information and they have to search for it. And then it's about, personalization. So other things that about who they are and one thing that's great about HelpShift and working with Kantan is that the language and understanding where your audience and where they're coming from. And then if you do have the ability to translate, then it's, maybe you don't need, a real dedicated native speaking person in that language. And then we have other tools from a response time, way to enforce SLA. So I think overall, holistically, just the platform itself can do a lot of that experience.
Yeah.
Tim, just to say something there about, you were saying that the first conversation is always like, hi, how are you? Or, what can I help you with today? Or it might be, I've seen you've downloaded this, giving some information first. But if that's not in English and it's in a different language and the agent has to do it, that initial communication, that initial connection, if the end user, like you say, is Spanish or Russian or French or whatever it might be, if English is the first way you reach out, they initially have to stop and think because it's not their first language, right? And that's something that can cause a barrier. Some people are more comfortable, initiating conversations and talking about problems when they don't have to think about what they say. They can just think about the problem. And so language, is a barrier to providing good CX. And resourcing that is important. So yeah, you're 100% right. Make sure you have all the data, but also at the same time, make sure you're connecting, because people tend to connect with people using language. And if you're not using their language, then it can be a bit of a tricky thing. So that's why I think our partnership with the two tools, when people are working, it has the ability to help people with that kind of stuff. It's really quite useful. Yeah,
that's a really good point. And one of the things that we especially see within the app world is how it also affects ratings of the different apps. If you don't respond in sometimes native, but also in a fast and efficient manner, then that affects your ratings, i.e. that affects your likelihood of being discovered and so forth.
Right. So if I went onto an app there, for example, and I said, hi, my name's John, and I got a response in Chinese. Then I would probably go, hold on a minute. I didn't know that this was only supporting Chinese. And I would have to then go and figure out, well, how am I going to solve this problem? So the assumption is that you're building something and you're creating something that should be simple for the person to be able to use your product, right? And that's why keeping it simple is really important. And trying to forecast expectations, what Tim said about make sure you have the right data, then also make sure you're presenting it in a meaningful and useful way to the person, that's using the application or using the game or, trying to solve the problem.
Which perfectly sums up why it is that customers expect flawless communication, and why it is that it's so, I want to say goddamn, but I know that's not okay. But that is very that is very crucial to think about how do you create a very great user experience from different angles, and also from not only focusing on the digital experience, but also the offline experience, and then approaching it from an omni-channel perspective. So what we will now dive further into is these, again, stats. I really love getting these interesting insights into what's happening across the world, and also take it a bit away from just I think and more into this is real facts that we can actually look at. And one of the things that obviously all of us have seen the last couple of years and we felt close to our hearts is that the changes in how it is that we're working. So we're shifting from maybe going in 5 days to the office, sitting at our desk, but now we are also expecting these hybrid opportunities, or maybe completely work remote. For example, we do at AppFollow, all of us are remote. But what I think is interesting, and what I wanted to ask you guys about, is what I find the challenging labor market, higher salary demands, great resignation, as we've seen, especially in the US. How do you guys see that it's affecting and being very relevant from a perspective of creating a great user experience? And I think you, Dominic, touched a bit upon it with the example of going into an app and then writing something, and then you get a response in Chinese. Can you maybe put some light
Yeah,
on it.
the expectations there are, that shouldn't happen, right? But from a user's point of view, but the realism of the changing world and the market that we live in today is that you can't have a single location or a single team handling every single language, manually, in a manual process. It's really hard to do that. So like the workforce is changing, and also the costs are changing. So people are looking at smarter and more intelligent ways of how can I provide support, and then the users are changing too, because of course, so the expectations are rising and the costs for supporting them with people are rising. So you have to find ways to balance, human work along with solutions that bring people together. And that's a big shift. What we probably call, what a lot of people are calling is a workforce crisis. Now, I know that's a bit alarmist, but at the same time, when we see what's happening around the world, trying to find people to stay in the job and keep the churn ratio, as you were saying, about the same people who are highly skilled in the job is hard. So trying to find ways to maintain and keep them in your team, retaining product knowledge, retaining the skill that they need to, as Tim mentioned earlier, present the right data, understand products, understand the game, be able to solve problems quickly. Retaining those people is really difficult because people are looking, staying a very short period of time and moving on. So in the Western world, anyway, we're definitely seeing a much more, troublesome employee market. But I think automation is the key for that, and I think Tim will probably, talk more about the automation part.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. It's the rising costs, not just from customer acquisition, but also, internal maintaining, your headcount and FTEs and budgets for that, and everything's going up. And so how can we help with that? And really it's through automation, AI and automation. We have a lot of data, and I even talked about this in a previous webinar we did last week about, how do you recession proof, and kind of, there's a lot of ROI or value when you leverage automation, because it can be done in a multiple, ways. It's not about reducing headcount. It could be about maintaining your headcount. It could be about maintaining the efficiency and productivity of the fixed amount of agents that you have. And then when you expand or have a broader kind of scope in terms of language support, that becomes even more challenging. So the tools are there to ensure that, agent, not only the customer experience, right? And speaking to them in the language that they're accustomed to. Kama, you mentioned it at the intro. It was about it's much easier to retain than it is to acquire new, right? That customer acquisition cost is so high, and that the expectation of consumers now is also really high, and that if they don't get the experience, or they have a bad experience with, let's say, maybe it's a purchase experience, maybe it's a website experience, but also with a support experience, it's very easy for them to say, I'm done. There's another 5 other brands that might provide the same type of or similar type of service or product. I'm going to go check that out. And so leveraging the automation component really can drive a lot of value to support that. And so for HelpShift, 1.5 to 10 times kind of the return on investment with an automation strategy. We do it for gaming, we do it for retail, for fintech, IoT brands on our platform, and it really does span not just it could be English only, but also, Dominic, you've been talking about it. It's the language that you need that is native, right? It's English. It's not, we call it here in ESL or English as a second language. Well, you're trying to think about, well, how do I even respond? I have to now translate it in my mind before I type it, right? And so why not leverage the tools? Like we support for HelpShift 180 different languages, right, out of the box. So that already could help that experience, help the customer find what they need, even if they don't talk to an agent, right? And then also the tools on the translation side for an agent, and then also from an automation and bot experience, you can reach a lot more of your audience in a much more meaningful way.
Yeah, and Tim, as you said, about that communication part with the end client, and the automation is key. But so sometimes, like you need to have a clear vision of what you want the customer experience to be. You can't, you have to be real as well. So you have to say, look, this is what I can do with the resources I have. This is what I can do with the budget I have. This is what I can do. And have a plan, have a plan and a vision of what you want to achieve. That might not be, for example, doing every language, every market all in one go. It might be slightly different. So have a plan, have a vision, try to build towards it. But make sure that even if you start with low amounts of automation, that you're building something that will that will be really quite good. And you might start your journey in different places. You might start really small. You might be acquired by a big company. So you're going to have lots of people are going to have lots of different journeys in terms of what they do in terms of customer support. You might be thrown in the deep end if you're acquired, and all of a sudden you have a huge amount of customers now you have to support, right? So you have something that has to all be automated really, really quickly, and your journey is very different. So it's interesting, different companies in this call that are, let's say they go win a publishing deal if they're a gaming company, and all of a sudden now they have to be able to provide that kind of, or if they're publishing a particular game that blows up, they have to provide support in lots of markets really, really quickly. Whereas if something might be a slow burner, maybe a free to play, you might not see as quickly as a pickup, and then eventually over time it becomes really, really big. So you scale, which is an interesting thing for us, right? Because we get to talk to these people all day about this kind of stuff. So
yeah, which is very interesting because you're touching on this, like what you need to think about when you're scaling your CX effort. And as you guys can see on the poll that was just launched, is like how do you use automation and AI for translation? And one of the things that Tim, Dominic, and I talked about like prior to this webinar was the whole conversation about AI and how and AI and automation, how that can help you not only scale your CX efforts, but also how it can be a bit for some terrifying to implement into your organization or into your daily work and so forth. And before I jump into just like briefly asking you guys about it from the AI and automation perspective, I want to put in a very interesting learning I had a couple of months ago, which was that automation can seem terrifying when you introduce it to your agents, for example, that are responding to reviews, app reviews, or so forth. But what it also can help prevent, and also what it can help increase instead, is actually the happiness of your agents. And that is because when you look at app reviews, then sometimes a company or an app can get a lot of offensive, very negative reviews, which can actually affect the mood of your agents. And it also takes away time from what they really need to focus on. And using AI and our automation, for example, you can then have, or you can implement an auto response or auto reply to these offensive reviews, and that thereby helps your agents, and it also takes away some negativity or bad experiences along the way. What have you guys thought a lot about? Obviously, Kantan, you have a lot of AI, and Dominic in your solution. But what have you heard around being like, about the robots are coming, or what we want to call it?
Yeah, the Skynet or the Terminator, right? The end of humanity as it's dawning on us. And the thing that I've seen with artificial intelligence and AI in the workplace is that it's slowly being used more and more and more. And when you know that artificial intelligence and AI is, let's say, mature, usually it's because it's being used by everyone all the time. So when that technology becomes mature, like we look at Google and these kind of technologies, Google Translate, that those kind of AI technologies, now they're available for everyone and they're being used, so this is important, right? So these technologies are mature. So what your expectations were maybe 10 years ago or even 6 years ago should not be the same now. Right? Should be the same. So you have to be aware that the technology is moving. So usually when you see it adhere to the public sector, it usually means that there is a lot of things going on in the private sector that you're not aware of. You know, so that's important. And you know, when you look at the you know the scaling of using AI, well, if you think about how, well, from my particular perspective with language AI, right? And what does the impact of language AI do when you're scaling your CX efforts, right? What does it do? Well, the key thing is, if you think about it, if you remove the language as a barrier completely, then you start to look at the volume of tickets you're processing as a whole with your whole team. So that means any agent can handle any language. And you start to go, when do I need the people to handle the volume of tickets? And it's a very different conversation. And it, with systems like HelpShift, which is fantastic, where the agents can be based anywhere, right? So they can be anywhere around the world. And if you're trying to do a lot of people have the Havana of the follow the sun support, right? Where it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in any language. Like, the days of that being impossible are actually almost gone, I would say, because of technologies like HelpShift and Kantan. HelpShift provide the platform where all your agents are in one place. With Kantan and the experience we've had with people using apps, you don't need the agent to have the language. It's always good to have an agent with language, and sometimes with key languages do that. But for scalability purposes, or maybe financial purposes, you don't want to have someone sitting there at 4 o'clock in the morning, doing I don't know, Spanish tickets when you might get one a week. But you might, if you looked at all your tickets, you might realize that having one agent do the, let's say, skeleton shift makes sense. So that would mean that you're not hiring, or let's say scaling based on local resources or geographical constraints and things like that you might have been doing before. The combination of the two, I think, is really, really important. And if you're not localizing and doing this as a standard, then I think that's important, right? You could be doing it as a standard, because that's where the expectations are. As you can see from your from your message, no one expects to deal with support or have an experience that isn't in their own language. Everyone expects it. And if you're not thinking about that, then that's a challenge. But so that's my experience on it anyway. So
that's a really, really interesting one, and it also, because it really it narrows down why it is that having this opportunity, like really leveraging AI and automation, that then you shift the concern and you shift the entire view on how it is that you should view your support tickets and so forth, and it can help you scale. That's very
I'll add to that. I think it's again, you're in the channel that most people are now used to, right, on an email. But those are probably the worst performing channel that we see. Messaging is prominently the best performing channel, especially with HelpShift. The response time is there. If you're leveraging even automation within a messaging experience, you're now responding exactly when your customer is raising their hand saying, hey, I need help. And if you leverage automation where it's, let's say this was an issue type that would go to an agent, and the agent needs to ask 4 or 5 questions to truly understand, well, you could leverage the bot to do that. And the bot can do it within seconds. And at least that way, once it gets to an agent, then the agent has the information that he or she would need and to really, solve their problem. What does that do? That improves the customer experience, that improves the agent experience, and hopefully that improves the feedback or the CSAT, right? And the feeling of, hey, their response, got it. And then when you layer in language, and it was in my own language, that's important.
Makes a lot of sense. And I remember you when we had a conversation, you and I, Tim, you spoke about a lot of, like, a lot of people that have really managed to leverage automation to an extreme wonderful extent. Can you maybe tell us a bit about how they went on that journey? Like, where did they start? Did they realize we need someone to take care of all these tickets that we get in, or what actually made them think, hey, automation might be a way to solve it for us?
Yeah, I think I've seen it from large scale apps or games. I've seen it from smaller team size, where there's not a lot of resources. So I've seen the approach from both angles. From the larger scale, one was a really large gaming company, successful on console. They launched this mobile game, it was a first-person shooter game, and I mean their MAU was 60 million, and they had 60,000, 67, 80,000 issues in a month. They had a large team, but still they were able to deflect a lot through self-service. But still, that 1 to 2% of volume that would come in, that still was a lot of tickets, right, for agents. And so number one was, hey, we need to get in front of this. We can't keep up. And so automation, leverage automation, full and partial, right? A pretty aggressive strategy to do that from a self-service, and then taking data of what and who's a paid player versus who's a free player. That would also differentiate the type of service you would get. And then also you layer then the language support, and they would support, I think, up to like 12 different languages. And so we have the ability to translate a lot of the automation strategy into those languages, and it really has helped them. And on the other end of the spectrum, right, if you're a small team, maybe you only have 5 agents or 10 agents or 15, but you're starting to see a lot of growth, right? Your brand's taking off, but resource constrained, can't add headcount. Okay, let's apply some automation there. And Dominic, you talked about scale, right? And I get made fun of by like my friends or my team when I say you have to nail it before you scale it. So start small, right? Figure out the applied use case first, whether it's 1 language or 2 languages. Maybe there was some growth there, and okay, we're now in a new market, but we don't have the resources for this. Okay, let's translate. Let's use automation to do that. And if that works, and you have your success criteria and you're monitoring kind of the metrics, then it's like you start to think about, well, how then can we apply this more broadly, right? And so nail it before you scale it. It's something that I say a lot. Or don't try to boil the ocean. Really try to hone in on what you really need to focus on first. Solve that, and if it works, it doesn't hurt to then think about, okay, where else can this be applied?
Yeah, I totally agree, Tim. Keep it simple, stupid. Use a KISS methodology, right? Use that to really clearly define what things you're going to do. And also, like with those like 80,000 tickets, 60,000 tickets, that's a lot, right? To be able to manage. And then if let's say 70% of them are in different languages, like physically and geographically to get bums on seats to do that, and quickly, you can't do it, and sustainable as well. Like you're saying, some of those tickets might be French or and non-paid. Some of them might be. So, what do you do? And then I suppose when you're going through this process, are you tracking the data you need to make smart decisions? Like when you're scaling, if you're starting small, it's good to make sure you're tracking that data, because 80% of those tickets could have been something really quite small a bot could take on. Initially might be, oh, I've lost my password. I know that's that's me, right? That's me. I lost my password, right? So I'm that annoying guy, and then it's always because I put the app or something like that in the wrong place. Anyway, but generally,
I hope that's not the time you get an answer in Chinese and you're like, no.
You're like, oh, okay, but it's sometimes like. You're going to get like a 80%. Like if you looked over all your tickets, I find in general, like you're going to get 80% of the tickets where automation, and human intervention can be minimal. And then you're going to get 20% of your tickets, which are the ones that maybe need more finessing, need more effort, need more human intervention. You're going to have that. So like automation can help scale that majority of like, things that might be taking up people's time. And traditionally, like you were saying earlier, if you're an agent or you're a person stuck on a call, then you have to hang on and you have to wait until that's ready. And it's so annoying when it's just a password thing you're waiting for. If it's an email or chat, if you have to queue in a place where you have to wait a long time for that, it's going to affect your experience. You're going to move on quickly. Whereas if you have the ability, like with our tools put together, for agents to handle, let's say, multiple tickets at the same time, have 4 or 5 threads running at the same time. That's where also the automation kicks in for the initial parts, but the actual agents also can multitask. And they can start to say, well, I can handle this ticket in French, I can handle that ticket in German, I can handle that ticket in Hungarian. And they can all be doing very similar things at the same time in the one place. Whereas, before, traditionally, that's not going to be possible. So, people are used to saying, okay, let's just have a call center and put a load of bums on seats. That is literally 5 years ago. You know, that's 5
only
years.
5 years ago. I thought that was a long.
Yeah. I think that's 5, 6+ years ago now.
Oh,
I think people are smarter now. We're getting smarter. We've had to be smarter because of money and budgets, but generally.
Yeah, that's a really good one. And then when you are working with your different customers, and where is it that you see, Dominic, from your perspective, where would it be good to start introducing an AI in that, like a chat or a quick language and translation and so forth? Where do you say that it would be a good way to start, and when?
So if your product's already translated or you're selling it in the market, you should providing CX in that language. If it's not localized for the market, but you're selling it in the market, your CX still should be done in multiple languages. Because what you can do in that kind of scenario is you might be, let's say, launched it in France. Okay, it's left in English because you don't have the budget for it. If your CX is in French and you get enough users built onto the platform or onto the game, and he said, you know what, we've got a lot of people using this actually. Maybe we should be translating and localizing it to increase the amount of players playing the game in that region, because they feel supported, they're more likely to come back. So the things like that might be a good way to do. So you like if you my belief is that if you sell it in the market, you should be translating, and if you're translating, AI really is any scalable process to be able to do it properly. Until you get to the point where you've hit a mass of users where starting to add humans into the mix makes more sense. Yeah,
that makes sense. And it's very interesting also, like from the app perspective, because it's just so easy to just launch apps across the world in all countries, and you don't necessarily think about, oh yeah, French people, are they good at speaking English, or do they actually prefer to have it in French? And also the aspect of the different nuances in the language, because it might be just one word in Danish and then 5 words in
English. Exactly. When people create apps, for example, in English is obviously being American, American English, whatever they're building it in. What you find is that they don't realize that there's masculine, feminine tense. They don't consider it. They don't think about how that can affect in the application or even in the game itself, or they don't understand these kind of language nuances. That's why, you can do your support. You can talk about localization with localization providers and technical people to help localize your app. And embedding AI into it allows you to translate whatever's there straight away, but you're always going to need humans in the loop, and skilled humans, because AI's got smart, so humans have to be smarter, right, to add value. And that means the human level of skill has increased now to evaluate, oh, that's translated, but is it in the right context? Is that a masculine? Is an orc a man or a woman? Is that's a scenario question I never thought I'd get into, but yes, that does happen nowadays too. So
that's a really good point, and it also taps it right into the user experience, like that keyword. Why is it so crucial? One of the things that I'm a bit curious to understand, and that might be also like the final area, which is interesting from the perspective of creating this global user experience, not necessarily only using AI and automation, but keeping it in mind that you have to be aware of how do you scale your CX efforts. How do you make sure that your agents are happy? How do you make sure that you leverage all the user insights to put into your product, like feed it back into those, or as having it as part of your marketing campaigns, or like all the great areas of a company where you can actually leverage insights and unlock user feedback. But what I'm a bit curious to learn and hear your thoughts around is, how do you actually evaluate if you're doing it the right way? Like now you've set up a great chat, or you have a great channel where you have users and customers adding in feedback, complaining about stuff, or all the type of things that you can have when you get feedback from users and customers. Like, how do you evaluate if it's good enough, or if you're creating the type of experience that you want to do? And maybe you can tap into that, Tim, first, and then Dominic, you can go after.
Yeah, we get that question all the time, and
Yeah.
and it could be as simple as, you know, a customer saying, "Hey, I want to address this issue type or full automation in this market. You know, is it response time? You know, what is your, you know, a lot of times I'll say, well, what are your current metrics? You know, what is your current, you know, performance, either across the board or for a specific issue type or even a specific location or region. And then from there, you know, that tells me a lot. And so we can either improve it or we can either support it or you know, bolster it. So it's response time, you know, it could be agent productivity, the number of, you know, resolutions by an agent. CSAT's obviously a big one. Really, again, it depends, right, on what it is that we're trying to achieve. What are the goals for the specific organization? A lot of times it can be, you know, done from then we'll say, okay, you know, there's a segment of issue volume that Dominic was talking about where it's like, I lost my password. And what if you could give back, you know, let's say that was 12% of your overall issue volume. And it's simply just, here's the steps to do that. You don't need an agent to do that. You can leverage automation to share that information. And if you give back that time, what does that do? That makes now your agents more productive, right? And hopefully from a, you know, customer facing perspective, that gives them the information that they need and they get what they want. So, you know, a lot of times it's about understanding, you know, what could be done from a full automation perspective where automation does everything, right? It resolves the issue. It doesn't go to the agent. There's a cost per issue tied to every time an agent is responding and resolving an issue. So that obviously the cost would come down from that perspective. And then it gives the agents back time. And then you break it down from a partially automated, you know, perspective, from you leverage bots and or automation and agents working together. We see that in our platform, you know, usually yields the highest CSAT.
Interesting.
And
so
then,
the combination of humans and robots, to go back to
yeah,
the analogy.
exactly. And so that, you know, it's either above or just on par with the agent only experience. And obviously that really depends on the brand too and their service levels. So some brands have, you know, the service level is lower, right? It's like, hey, we just have to resolve as many as we can because the volume is just too great. Where there's others, depending on the type of product or service, right? And you have to understand that too. Then it's okay, we have to be thoughtful to ensure that the level of service is maintained without kind of, you know, taking away from that with an automation strategy. So, you know, we look at it from that perspective. We look at it from ROI. I talked about the return that you could get if you have that. So
that's very interesting. Just like I saw the result from the poll about retention. I think that's an interesting one. You look like you had something on your mind, Dominic?
Yeah, because I seen that revenue and retention were the top ones. And I was thinking
that's a third, I think.
Yeah, well, it flashed up quickly. I caught a little bit, but I thought, you know, they were the main ones, right? And so, you know, how we measure success, right? From a KantanAI point of view, and we're dealing with the language AI stuff, right? So, how can we fool the user to believe that they have had an experience with a native speaking agent? Can we fool them into that? Now, that's hard to measure, right? That's hard to measure. But so we have to use the traditional standard, like Tim said, about CSAT and so on and so forth, right? And for one particular gaming company, what we did with this mobile, large gaming company, large user base, we're using humans to do all the support, and then they introduced AI and they introduced, you know, technology for it. And what we did is we monitored the CSAT 3 weeks before we did it. And it was around a kind of like a 4.2. And yes, they were using help shifts, so that's that was a good thing. But because we had all the data in place, and we said, okay, so here's the levels of CSAT we're getting. Now, if we now slowly switch out the humans and start adding AI in, what we found in the beginning is the CSAT dropped down a little bit because we were still learning about how the interactions were working with those agents and those customers. And then afterwards, what happened was, like, by week 3, we had now learned enough that we started to fool people. And at the end, the customer satisfaction went up. So it went up to like 5.3. And do you know why? Because the agents now can handle all the different languages. So their tickets, they could handle multiple tickets at the same time. So the volume of tickets they could process was more. So people were getting their problem solved quicker, and therefore the CSAT went up. And we were like, yes, we fooled them, you know. But you know, it's not. I know it's a funny analogy about it, but you know, CSAT is important for us in engaging. You know, have we? You know, are we delivering on the expectations of the market? It's not perfect. The other ones, as you know, Tim will talk about as well, as you know, the average resolution time or the average ticket per agent time, stuff like that. That's when you're looking at productivity.
Yeah.
You know, so if you're looking at scaling and looking at this kind of stuff, you know, and tracking the KPIs, I always say customer part is one, you know, and then production is another. And if you get the two right, then you're guaranteed to increase revenue. Yeah. Because if you're delivering good productivity and good customer satisfaction, then you're going to guarantee revenue. If you solely focus on revenue, then what will happen is you'll start making decisions that aren't data driven and more revenue driven, and that can lead to bad decisions. That can lead to maybe reducing the headcount where you shouldn't. That could mean maybe investing in, let's say, reducing the number of licenses. That can mean that you have in terms of automation. That can mean not automating because it costs money to do it. So you know, I would say try to make sure that whatever you plan to do, that you have a good return on investment for it, but you also are using the KPIs you can, like, you know, the average ticket handling time, and you know, you see that, because they're the only tools we have. You know, apart from the MWIFE, I don't know what the acronym will be, Tim. Maybe you help me out with that. But you know, pull the wool of your eyes, average. but that's something I think, you know, is where AI is helping you with that stuff as well. So
that's very interesting also, because when we were looking at the results from the poll, we had obviously revenue and CSAT, and then we also had retention as the second. And if you focus, and as you said, if you just focus on the revenue, then you obviously also potentially lose a lot of customers, and in the end you don't really deliver on a great customer experience or user experience.
Yeah. But one thing about revenue now, I changed the revenue is one thing, but I would say like the operational costs, right? Operational costs are slightly different from revenue. If you can reduce your operational costs, then you can increase your revenues. You know, so like if you take, for example, the ability to now geolocate your staff anywhere in the world, the cost of having agents now based in Europe, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you don't need. You move them to, I don't know, there's a big trend right now to go to the Far East, look like Manila, the Philippines, that kind of place, or various other kind of, you know, areas where you can use agents which are which can support the Western world for out of hours, can support them for, you know, for that, for let's say for things that you don't necessarily need to have bums on seats for, you know, in Europe. So you can augment the two to help make money by being operationally clever. You know, that's something to consider. And like, don't employ someone just to do French tickets if you don't need to. Then they're just sitting there, and you know, you're going to find there's like lag time where they're just not doing anything. And you know, the one ticket they might handle, you know, might not be that valuable to you. But yeah, so that's just my experience.
But there's also like, there's one aspect of, you have like one French guy sitting, lady sitting answering only the French tickets. I think there's a perspective from the employee perspective, who could say so. It's not really fulfilling just answering one ticket a day, for example. And as I view the automation and the AI here, then having that one, even though the person is native French and has English as the second language, then giving them the possibility of answering more tickets and actually have something to do during that day, work day, then that's more fulfilling in the end. So I think we have one question, and that is because we have 5 minutes left. I think let's take this question and then round up. It says, how do you ensure you have consistency from the first point of contact and throughout the whole conversation? I think it would be very interesting to hear from your perspective, Tim, and then maybe a bit brief, and then also a bit brief from you, Dominic, and your different perspectives.
Yeah, it really goes back to a similar theme. It's, the front end or customer experience and then the agent experience. And so giving the channel that the customers that want to be in, leveraging an automation strategy and with language support that can do that. And then on the agent side, it's really about enforcing process or workflows and SLAs. And there's tools within HelpShift that can help do that, so that, if you have high service level and you need to respond within a minute, there's ways to enforce at least reminders and prompts of, hey, you haven't responded yet. How do we maintain that level of service from both customer side and agent side? Because as you know, customers may not respond either. How do you prompt them? How do you ensure they're still there without, again, keeping the queue and the backlog open?
Yeah, that's a good one. And Dominic, do you have a couple of words around it as well?
I'll be quick because I know we're tight for time. But 3 words and the same word: data, data, data.
Okay.
First, data. What words are they? What words are you translating? What terms are you doing? Making sure they're consistent, so that if we're doing the AI machine translation part, it's consistent.
Yeah.
Because everyone says things differently. And consistency with templates as well, and HelpShift and how you're responding, the automation part, that's key too. So making sure that that's important, and learning from the data you have and building a consistent approach to how you deliver the answers. And that's looking at terminology, looking at the kind of content that needs to be translated, making sure that the engine is designed for that. And that's where it's slightly different from the Googles and the other kind of engines that you might see on the market, where it's just bog standard. It needs to understand the context. Context equals consistency, and you only get that with data.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it also taps into like machine learning versus AI, and AI versus machine learning, and so forth. On that note, thank you very much. It was a very interesting conversation about how it is that you can create exceptional global user experience, focusing a lot, obviously, about automation and AI, but also how we can, with the tools that we have available, scale your CX efforts, and how you can be even better, and how you can really leverage the possibilities that you have around you. I found it very learning. I learned a lot, and I found it very amazing to be together with you guys. I hope all our participants had the same experience, and I want to say thank you to all of you guys.
Excellent. Thank you.
See you later, alligator.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.